Welcome to the Book Faire podcast. My name is Anthony, and this week we have an interview with author Ruchira Gupta. The Department of Education declares gender-neutral bathrooms a violation of Title IX. PragerU publicly releases questions used in Oklahoma's America First test for teachers. And a controversial trans book ban fails in Tennessee for the third time. Let's begin with an interview with Ruchira Gupta, author of The Freedom Seeker.
Good morning, Anthony. Pleased to be on your show.
Can you start us off by introducing yourself and a little bit about the book that we'll be discussing today?
Hi. Yes, for everyone who's tuned in, my name is Ruchira Gupta. I'm an activist author. I work to end sex trafficking and to create a world in which no child is bought or sold. I have a foundation where I get girls from red light areas into schools, file cases against traffickers, and organize women to access their bank accounts and documents and start new lives. I have been doing this for nearly 20 or 30 years. I began life as a journalist, and I bumped into this issue of sex trafficking when I was walking the hills of Nepal. And I came across rows of villages with missing girls. And I was puzzled. I followed the trail and I found little girls locked up in cages 1,400 kilometers away in brothels in Mumbai. I was upset. I was angry. I ended up making a documentary on the subject and won an Emmy. And when I was on stage, all I could see were the eyes of the mothers. So that's when I decided that I would use my Emmy and my journalism and my documentary not to build a career in journalism, but to make a difference. So I stepped off the stage and started, working towards creating an NGO, which now helps children in red light areas get to school and college. But I also worked with the US Senate and with the United Nations to create laws and protocols to end trafficking so that I could do both things at the same time, top down, bottom up. But the top was always influenced by what I was listening to the women. And so, over the years, I built the NGO, I advised the UN, I even began working for the UN in different parts of the world, Iran and Kosovo, in conflict zones. But also, I felt that wasn't enough. And then finally, I also thought I needed to reach more people because human trafficking is the second largest organized crime in the world, trading in hundreds and thousands of people and generating billions of dollars. So I decided that I would reach out to the next generation of activists by teaching. I teach at New York University, but also, I began writing books for young people, which I call social justice adventures. And to tell them that, first of all, the pursuit of social justice is an adventure, and to discuss with them books in a very fast-paced adventure story format with a lot of challenges and cliffhangers along the way about issues that actually exist in the world around them, which affect other children. And nobody talks to them about those issues. So I thought I would talk to them in an accessible, hopeful, truthful way, and it might give them some clues in their own lives. So that's why I write for Scholastic, and that's why I write books for young adults, and that's who I am.
That's amazing. And writing to a younger generation about such serious issues, that takes us perfectly to talking about The Freedom Seeker. What is this story about?
The Freedom Seeker is a story about a 12-year-old girl called Simi, who's born in India, and her family are interfaith. Her father is Sikh and her mother is Muslim. And in the growing backdrop of religious intolerance, which is rising in India, her family is attacked by vigilantes for being interfaith. And so they decide to flee India because it becomes very serious. Simi is a really good student. She's a hockey captain in her school. She has four loving grandparents. Her father is a farmer. He owns land and farms there. Her mother is a nurse, but they have to leave everything because of these vigilantes. So her father becomes a taxi driver in Queens, New York, and Simi and her mother have to follow. And the story is about her crossing the Mexico border through the barbed wire fence, walking in the harsh Sonoran desert in blazing heat with no water, with a bunch of other children. She makes friends with a boy called Jose, who's 12, who's fleeing gang warfare from Honduras. And together they navigate the desert. They navigate the evil coyotes who try to who separate Simi from her mother, and how Simi, navigates this foreign country, the harsh desert, loneliness, the border detention camps, the shelters, to find home and safety. That's what the story is about. It's about child migration, it's about courage and resilience, it is about friendship, it is about family.
And for the audience that may not know, can you talk a little bit about what the coyotes are that you're referring to? Some people may hear that and think, small foxes. Can you talk a little bit about what the coyotes are at the border?
So Simi and her mother pay human smugglers to bring them into their desert because to bring them into America because the application for a visa is refused, even though her father is there already. And these human smugglers are known as coyotes because they are like desert foxes who know the ins and outs of the ravines and the desert paths and the trails and all of that. And they are the ones who escort people who enter America through the Mexico border. So these are the coyotes, and some of them are like, uh, part of gangs which run a whole smooth operation all the way from India to the US, bringing people from India via Spain, then onto places in Latin America, onto a train called the Wild Beast, which is so dangerous that people slip off it into gorges. Then, they keep them in places in Mexico till they can smuggle them through holes in the barbed wire fence into the Sonoran Desert. And very often they squeeze as much money as they can out of these hapless people who are running away from war and conflict and economic hardship and, even intolerance. So these people are kind of helpless, and the coyotes make a lot of money out of them. And some of them are actually very dangerous. They carry guns and they carry knives, and they can be very ruthless to even the people they've taken money from to smuggle them across the desert into the United States.
Now, these people are very dangerous. They're often affiliated with gangs. They have weapons. And it kind of begs the question of why would Simi and her Ami choose to work with these people? And you mentioned that it was because their visas to the United States were denied. And now writing a book does take time, and I did want to kind of ask about this. When did you first begin writing this book? And with the results of the United States election being what they were, did that influence the way that you wrote this story as it developed?
I wrote the book 3 years ago. And yes, and it so meets the moment now because clearly the problem of child migration and migrants in general, the whole migration crisis has escalated beyond my imagination. And what the latest data is that 18 million children in the United States are living with at least one immigrant parent, and that's 1 in 4 children, a quarter of America's children, and they are scared that either they will be deported or a loved one will be deported. So they are living in fear. Some of them are even choosing not to go to school or play in parks, and this will affect not just their present but their future. It also affects their friends, their teachers, their schools, because they're scared that somebody will come into the school to drag them away or whatever. So the atmosphere for children is right now full of fear, which no child should be living through. So the book has come out in this moment when the migration crisis is ongoing, and this is what children are thinking about and fearing. And therefore, this book becomes really a useful tool to talk to kids, because adults need to talk to children if they are scared. How do you end fear? By giving them information, by giving them tools to understand what is going around. And so this becomes I had no idea how timely and necessary this book would become when I wrote it. I wrote it 3 years ago to humanize, because I felt that a lot of times, there was propaganda out there which was making those who were coming to America seeking home and safety seem as if they were criminals. But, the people I was writing about and the people I had researched were just ordinary human beings, desperate. And, looking at America because they thought there was more safety here, more opportunity here. And this is interesting because at that time, when the impulse to write the book came from two articles I read in newspapers within the space of a year. The first was about Punjabi family from the very town that my character Simi comes from. They had to flee the India, and the father was became a taxi driver here in Queens, and the mother and the daughter were crossing the Sonoran Desert when the mother went to look for water for her daughter, got separated, and the border guards found the remains of the 6-year-old girl scattered in the desert later. And I began to wonder about this family and who they were, and I began to research. And while I was in the middle of my research, I read about another Indian family from Gujarat crossing into America from Canada in the dead of winter in their saris and chappals, and they froze to death. So again, I began to think that they were in Canada. Why did they need to come to America? That too in the middle of winter. What was going on? And my research, to my surprise, showed that the third largest number of migrants to the United States are Indians. The first are Mexicans, second are Cubans, and the third are Indians. And many are actually seeking political asylum because of intolerance, discrimination based on religion or caste, economic hardship based on discrimination. So it was not people from war zones who were the biggest migrants. It was the third largest was India. So then I began to dig in further. I went to the border, and I spent time along the barbed wire fences and walked in the desert, stayed without water, and just to know what thirst was like, talked to townspeople in these border towns. What did they feel about migrants? Went and saw the Eloy prison from outside, some of these shelters and places from outside, talked to people who had migrated and stayed in them, to journalists who'd been inside. So that's how I researched the book. But it was 3 years ago. And it was after the first time then that zero tolerance, zero intolerance had been imposed. But, nothing like what's going on now. Nothing. So really, the book is about child migration. And what does a child really want? Home and safety.
And when you were talking about how you hope that this book is a tool to help children who are dealing with fear, and right now children in America who are children of immigrants are dealing with the fear of deportation, of ICE and immigration laws. Simi and her family are dealing with fears in their own home. And that kind of brings us to another character of Ashok, who shows a different perspective of the children of the other side, the intolerant side, and how those intolerant ideals kind of get taught to children. Can you talk a little bit about Ashok and what his character arc is throughout the story?
Yes, so Simi is in school. She's a hockey captain. And, her classmate Ashok had wanted that. He wanted to be a hockey captain. And he doesn't like it that not only does he not become hockey captain, but a girl becomes a hockey captain. And then he begins to bully her. He bullies her on the grounds that she's half Sikh and half Muslim. And he begins to call her Paki, Paki. Now, Paki is a slur for someone that people want to insult, to say you're from a foreign country, an enemy country, Pakistan. And Simi has to fight back and say, I'm not Paki. Both sides of my family were born in India for 7 generations, that she's as Indian as him. But Ashok continues to bully her. He'll throw paper rockets at her in class. He and his friends will shower insults at her when she's cycling home, even in the hockey team that he's a member of. He won't follow Simi's leadership and make her feel small, really. So Simi has to overcome her desire to lash out at him, throw him out of a hockey team, or even, assert her leadership and bully him back a little bit, because she has an opportunity as the captain. But then, she has a grandfather who keeps saying that resistance can be based on kindness, and you can find a way to change someone that is a better thing than revenge by hitting back. By being the change you want to see. And you have to show him, lead by example and through acts of non-violent acts of kindness, who you are. Just don't tell him that you're a good person from a good family from India. Show him that you're a good person from a good family in India. And so, Simi actually starts teaching him how to play better hockey. And slowly he begins to respect Simi, that she includes him properly in the team and makes him a better hockey player. And then over the months, he actually begins to give her information about what's going on, keeps in touch with her, and they become friends finally towards the end of the story.
And it's not just the fact that while the interfaith family is probably the biggest point of the story, Ashok's rejection of her leadership kind of points at the intersectionality of how Simi is not just seen as lesser by Ashok because of her interfaith family. He sees her as less because she is a girl. Can you talk a little bit about how that intersectionality matters for the characters in the story?
Yeah, because Simi is treated with great love at home by all four of her grandparents, by her parents, and her father was a hockey champion. So he teaches her to play hockey. Her mother's a nurse, one grandfather is a doctor. So, she is taught that she can be anything. She's good in maths, she's good in sports, and she has also teachers and friends who encourage her. So for her to come across two kinds of bigotry, one is the bigotry of the fact that her religion, she comes from two religious backgrounds rather than one, which is something which, a boy brought up in a less cosmopolitan family does not understand, because we don't know what the messaging he has at home is. We don't know what he's picking up from the messaging in the backdrop of the rising religious intolerance in India at that time is. So, he's picking up things from the outside world and he brings it to school with him. And he's already doesn't like the fact that a girl is doing better than him. It's like almost like a challenge to his masculinity. And that too could be, the messaging he's picking up from society, that boys have to do better than girls, especially at sports. And she is taking away space that is actually meant for me. He has this sense of entitlement. And he brings it out through bullying and then picks up other things to bully her on, as well as being a girl. So this is the really the intersection of intolerance at two levels, but also, we have to remember that those who are nowadays beginning to embrace religious intolerance, many of them are also embracing misogyny at the same time. And it is kind of interesting to me when I look around at that why are they doing that? It could be the backlash of growing emancipation of women across the world, because we are getting more jobs, we are more visible in public places, and especially men who are not getting jobs or not getting the kind of jobs they want. Are thinking that actually it is women who are taking away their jobs, and which is not true, because what they have to understand is that it's not individuals who are at fault. There's a system flaw which can be actually tackled together, because there are enough jobs for all of us in the world. We just have to figure out how to access them. There's enough food for everyone in the world. So much food goes waste. We just have to learn how to distribute it. So these are the kind of things, which are in our world right now, this intertwining of misogyny and religious intolerance. And, toxic masculinity is a word we often use, but I don't like to use words which are catchphrases. I like to explain things in easy, accessible sentences that we live with every day. So that's why Ashok. But also, I know one more thing I want to say is that Ashok has followed an arc. He does change. And people who are bigoted in my story change. And I want to explain to both those who are likely become bigoted, because bigotry can enter your heart when you're very young, just because, someone refused a date with you. And you may say, I'm entitled to get this girl to go out with me. It can begin from there to whatever reason, some slight, some discrimination, some unfulfilled desire that I should have had this. How did that person have it? So, bigotry and bullying can begin very early on. But I also wanted to show that there is another path. And it's equally practical and equally useful for kids to know. And also those who are bullied in school or, treated unfairly, that they too can find a different way to challenge bullying and bigotry. And so I showed, actually based again on research, different things, but I've shown acts of kindness that Simi is taught by her grandfather to actually pursue in a sort of a revenge or a protest against this bigotry. So there are these men in the book who throw a rock through Simi's window. They are vigilantes. And the rock has a piece of paper wrapped in it saying that, you know, ban marriage against Hindu men and Muslim women. And the family is in the middle of a lovely festival, lots of food, music playing, when the rock flies through the window. And Simi is really upset, and she wants to go after those men, do something nasty and mischievous to them. But then she remembers that her grandfather has told her that, be the change you want to see, and give them a gentle response, a non-violent response to your anger. Don't become like them. So she actually goes out and buys some Indian sweets called jalebis for the men who are sitting around on the curbside. And they love those jalebis, they gobble them up. And then Simi gives them a note saying that, do you know that the recipes for these jalebis actually are Arab? And so, through a little act of kindness, sharing sweets, she also educates them that Muslim culture is not so bad, and it's not just terrorism. It's, art and culture and food and recipes and good things, music. So, this is how she behaves. And right through my book, there's a theme, I don't know if you, of kindness and community, because I want kids to know that kindness wins and freedom matters, um, and how that kindness can win. It's a very practical way of doing things.
And with the story of be the change you want to see in the world, win them over with kindness, it works with Ashok. However, Simi and her mother still have to leave the country, and that's a story that's true for so many people around the world. Um, just a couple of quick questions to let you give the final word. The first one is, what would you like to say to families or children that are in a situation like Simi, who are seeking asylum and are looking for a safe home?
Follow your heart. Don't give up. Be brave and form friendships and community wherever you are, because sometimes that friendship and community will give you the courage and strength to find an answer, to find a solution, or even just be happier where you are. So don't give up is my thing. And be kind, look for community. Because even in my book, Anthony, you might have noticed that, the only bad people in my book are really these people who throw a rock through Simi's window and then the coyotes. But everybody else are just human beings employed in a system, but they are capable, even in that system, of small acts of kindness, which make a big difference. And we don't understand that. So you will see that the border guard in the detention camp goes and plays a board game with Simi, because he thinks of he remembers his daughter, and that playing a board game gives Simi some strength and courage to carry on. Or a nurse in the infirmary shares a bit of information with Simi, again, it gives her a little bit of sense that there is humanity around me and people have recognized my humanity. So I think for all of us in this horrible moment that we are going through of anxiety and fear and worry about people we know, I think we all are capable of small acts of kindness. And our resistance does not have to be always marching on the streets. It can also be nonviolent protest. And that nonviolent protest can take the form of just a small act of kindness.
And the last question to give you the final word is just a simple one that you can interpret however you like. Ruchira, how do you see yourself and the work that you do as a writer?
I see myself as someone who is storytelling for change. I am a storyteller, and I want people to see the freedom seeker as a message in a bottle and read the message, interpret it the way you want to, find answers and a friend in Simi who will create our future.
Thank you. That was an interview with Ruchira Gupta. Her new book, The Freedom Seeker, is available now. You can learn more about Ruchira and her other work at ruchiragupta.com. Coming up next, we'll be looking at notable releases out this week. But first, if you appreciate the work being done on the Book Faire podcast, there are a number of ways you can show your support. First, you can like, comment, follow, or subscribe wherever you're currently listening to help the podcast reach new listeners. Second, you can go to patreon.com/thebookfair to find episodes posted early, as well as links to news sources used throughout the show. You can follow on Blue Sky at BookFairPod whenever there are questions that you can engage with. However, the best way to help the podcast is simply by sharing it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Now, on with the show. Next, let's take a look at some of the new releases, beginning with The Last Resort by Erin Entrada Kelly and illustrated by Naomi Franquiz. 11-year-old Lila Clement doesn't want to travel to the Ohio Inn owned by the recently deceased grandfather she never knew. She'd much prefer to spend her summer proving to her friends that she's not a drama queen like they claim. But following a near-death experience after her parents' car spins out on the wet highway, she starts having strange visions, which test her resolve to be strong and steady like a rock. The weirdness escalates when she encounters ghosts at the Castle Hill Inn, including the spirit of Grandpa Clem himself, who says he was murdered. Allying with ghost enthusiast newcomer Teddy and her video game-loving younger brother Caleb, Lila investigates the inn's sordid history. The stakes escalating as her parents and neighbors are besieged by nightmares about their worst fears. Now, Lila's burgeoning medium skills may be necessary to provide Grandpa Clem peace and save the town. Author Kelly deploys intensely scary scenes and chilling prose to manifest an eerie series-starting adventure. Grim ghost portraiture by Franquiz enhances the unnerving ambiance, including interactive digital aspects. Teddy has brown skin, the Clements are described as having Filipino ancestry, and this book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next is The Picasso Curse by Dan Gutman. A 12-year-old faces the surprise of a lifetime when he discovers a lost work by Pablo Picasso in this cinematic novel by Gutman. Edwin Hodge isn't thrilled when his parents drag him to the Woodside Flea Market until he spies a framed autographed poster of Kobe Bryant. Figuring it could be worth something, and eager to one-up school bully Vinny, who claims to have had dibs on it, Edwin purchases and returns home with his find. It's then that he discovers a Picasso drawing hidden in the frame. Now Edwin finds himself torn. The money he could make by auctioning the artwork could help his financially struggling family. But when word gets out about the priceless artifact, Edwin must determine if maintaining possession of the treasure is worth the headache that comes with it. Brief fourth wall breaking chapters dive into the history and lore of Picasso, an information free-for-all that Gutman delivers with his signature snark and panache. Propulsive and entertaining, this is an exciting adventure of complex ethical questions and daring do that centers topics such as decision-making and independence. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next is Reasons to Hate Myself by Susan Metallo. Metallo balances acerbic comedy with insightful prose to present an intimate character study told via blog posts that follows an autistic theater kid's attempts to navigate the aftermath of a friendship-ending error after 17-year-old Jess Lanza makes out with her best friend Chloe's boyfriend and is subsequently dubbed a boyfriend-stealing slutbag in a classmate's blog post. Jess decides to start her own blog, detailing her many embarrassing and/or hate-worthy mistakes. In rueful, often laugh-out-loud narration, Jess addresses her apparent flaws and vulnerabilities. Over the course of each entry, Jess additionally unearths personal realizations about her family, her future, and her friendship with Chloe, who is also autistic, and begins to see herself and her relationships in a new light. Characterization is a standout feature of this aching and self-aware novel. Through Jess's appealing first-person perspectives, author Metallo crafts interesting and realistic teens and adults, and offers a unique and nuanced view of an autistic teen experiencing high school. Chloe is Black, most other characters are white, and this book is recommended for ages 14 and up. And lastly, Silenced Voices, Reclaiming Memories from the Guatemalan Genocide by Pablo Leon. In a solo debut, Leon delivers a potent graphic novel examination of the effects of the Guatemalan Civil War on its people. In 2013, American-born brothers Jose and Charlie live with their overworked, single immigrant mother Clara in Langley Park. When a teacher asks Jose if his mother was following the coverage of the criminal trials relating to the Guatemalan genocide, Jose realizes that he knows nothing about his mom's past. Though initial attempts to broach the subject end with emotional outbursts from Clara, she soon shares stories about her youth in a Coetzee Mayan village. After Clara reveals that she hasn't seen her sister Elena since they were separated during a violent conflict as children, Jose and Charlie resolve to discover what happened to their aunt. Alternating chapters follow Jose and Charlie in the present as they grapple with questions about their identity, and Clara and Elena in the 1980s as they navigate traumatic instances of war. Information about the events addressed is peppered throughout a stirring story about the power of familial bonds and historical recollection in the face of grief, fear, and hopelessness. Saturated color and textured overlays add depth and ambiance to this meaningful offering. This book is recommended for ages 14 and up. Now, wrapping up the episode with some quick news stories. First, the U.S. Department of Education says Denver's all-gender bathrooms violate Title IX. Title IX is a federal law that prohibits sex-based discrimination in federally funded education programs or activities such as sports, scholarships, admissions, and more. In previous years, Title IX has been used to protect transgender students accessing sports based on their gender identity. Now, under Donald Trump's administration, the Federal Department of Education has declared that Denver public schools violated Title IX protections by creating gender-neutral bathrooms and allowing students to use bathrooms corresponding with their gender identity. The decision comes after an investigation into Denver's East High School, after the school district converted a single girls' bathroom into an all-gender inclusive bathroom. This was the result of a student-led process and included 12-foot-tall partitions for privacy. A second all-gender bathroom was created in the school to provide further access, and there are still girls and boys only bathrooms. Acting Assistant Secretary of the Education Department's Office for Civil Rights says in a press release, quote, Denver is free to endorse a self-defeating gender ideology, but it's not free to accept federal taxpayer funds and harm its students in violation of Title IX. End quote. Again, the all-gender bathrooms were created as an alternative for students who didn't feel comfortable using gendered bathrooms. They were pushed for by students, and the gendered bathrooms still exist. The question here is, what harm do gender-neutral spaces cause? The boogeyman of a man entering a women's bathroom is completely irrelevant, as assaults in bathrooms are never under the guise of trans people. What actual harm, not theoretical or potential threats, but actual harm, do gender-neutral bathrooms and spaces cause? Next, let's look at the America First teacher test by PragerU being administered in Oklahoma. Teachers moving to Oklahoma will now be required to pass an America First certification test. The test consists of 34 multiple-choice questions designed in partnership with PragerU. State Superintendent Ryan Walters claims that the test is meant to ensure teachers adhere to the state's curriculum standards. Walters says, quote, "We want great citizens. We want our kids to have a patriotic education." End quote. Firstly, the concept of patriotic education sounds very reminiscent of Nazi propaganda education of pre-World War II Germany. Second, opponents of the test propose that this will lead to fewer applicants for teachers in the state of Oklahoma. This is a clear example of the Conservative Party in the United States targeting public education. Let's take a look at a few of the questions included on the test. Question: how is a child's biological sex typically identified? Answer: visual anatomical observation and chromosomes. This is half correct. Doctors make a visual observation of genitals and assign a sex to a newborn baby. However, testing for chromosomes is not something done for newborns. The karyotype test to determine which chromosomes an individual has often costs hundreds of dollars, and XX and XY chromosomes are not the only variations of chromosomes in humans. Question: which of the following is a phrase from the Pledge of Allegiance? Answer: one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The phrase under God was added to the Pledge of Allegiance well after it was initially created. The choice of this answer shows the inherent bias behind PragerU and its religious influence. Question: what was Abraham Lincoln's primary reason for waging the Civil War? Answer: to preserve the Union. PragerU and conservatives in America have a long history of erasing slavery as a cause behind the Civil War. Technically, yes, Abraham Lincoln started the Civil War to preserve the Union. However, the Civil War was unquestionably fought over the South's right to keep and own slaves. The test covers a variety of topics from civics and history and an entire section about sex and gender identity. The test is a thinly veiled political test, with Oklahoma making a conscious effort to weed out teachers that go against their conservative ideology. Closing out this episode with some positive news, Sumner County policy banning transgender books fails for the third time. This story comes out of Tennessee, and a month after the previous proposal to the same library board. The policy did not hide its intent behind vague language of sexual themes. Instead, it seeks to ban any material that is, quote, pertaining, promoting, or subjecting a minor to transgender or gender confusion ideology, end quote. The proposal was first made in early 2025 and tabled without debate. rejected the second time, and now faces its third rejection with a wider margin. Joanna Daniels, chair of the library board, brought the policy up for another vote after 2 abstentions in July's vote. She described the policy as part of her overall mission to, quote, get the library back in order, end quote. Nearby Rutherford County libraries passed a nearly identical policy, and, as we covered on the April 24th episode of the Book Fair podcast, was promptly stopped by the ACLU and PEN America by a lawsuit that reversed the policy. During a call for a public comment, a Sumner County resident said, quote, I'm going to say essentially what I did the last time, because we are in a Groundhog Day situation. I want to point out the irony of praying before a meeting where you are purposely wanting to exclude an entire population of people. That's completely unchristian. What it boils down to is control. When you control what people can read, you control what people can think. Then you can control the people. End quote. I'm happy to see that the pro-censorship side is facing more opposition. But this is the third time this policy has been proposed in just one county. The fight for the freedom to read should be nationwide and ongoing. Rutherford County was able to enact the same policy, but the lawsuit from the UCLA didn't stop Sumner County from proposing book bans again and again. It's clear that conservative policies and their proponents are playing the long game and hoping that the public interest in politics slowly dies down, allowing the minority in favor of book bans to be able to impose their policies based on religious and political ideals, as opposed to allowing free speech and open access to all sources. This will conclude another episode of the Book Fair podcast. If you'd like to learn more about any of the stories today, make sure to check out patreon.com/thebookfair to find links to news sources used throughout the show. There are no posts hidden behind a paywall, no subscription is needed to access references, and you can also follow the Book Fair podcast on Blue Sky at BookFairPod. Thank you very much for listening, and as always, I'll talk at you next time.